To be a sociologist, you have to make the familiar strange. In other words, what you're used to seeing, what you're used to experiencing, you have to actually observe it. Most of the time, we don't observe the things that we experience on a regular basis. They are normal, they are everyday life, they are like the water that a fish swims in. You might say a fish is not really conscious of the water that it swims in. We are not really conscious of the atmosphere within which we live. Unless we were deprived of air, we wouldn't be aware of the air that we breathe constantly. So something to consider is that the best way to be a sociologist or to acquire a sociological lens is to get out of the familiar context. And this is often what sociologists will do, that they will go to a foreign country or a foreign setting or an institution or a culture and observe it as outsiders. The thing with observing your own culture or your own cultural setting or your own home or your own family is that you don't actually observe it very well because you're so used to it. It's habit for you. And so you don't actually notice the things on a day-to-day basis. If you did actually notice everything, the smells, the sights, the sounds of your own home, you would get very tired. So we get used to these things. The human sensory psychological system becomes, in a way, immune to those sensations and those sights and those sounds, so that we wouldn't be overwhelmed by them all the time. Sometimes I like to give my students the example of being an alien from outer space. So I asked them, for example, I was teaching at a college called Millikan University. It's a small town. It's not like Chicago. It's a smaller city in Illinois called Decatur. And I asked them what a Martian would notice if they arrived at, say, for example, a football game at Millikan University. So the things that we are used to seeing at a football game or a soccer game, whatever you want to call it, you become actually observant of if you think of yourself as being an outsider. So, for example, when I first went to a baseball game here in Wrigley Field, I got invited there. I'm not a sports fan. I don't enjoy sports, really. I don't enjoy watching sports. I know very little about sports. But a friend of mine said, I want to hang out with you. Let me give you a ticket. And I'm going to pay for your ticket, and you can go with me, and we can hang out and watch the Cubs play. So I said, okay, well, this is a thing all Chicagoans should do. So I decided that I would go. I was so bored. First of all, I didn't know what was going on. And second, there just didn't seem to be that much activity. And third, being on the outside of this knowledge that everybody seemed to have was an uncomfortable feeling, right? And so I had negative associations with being there. At the same time, I could see that when, for example, everybody sang, "Take me out to the ball game," that everybody had a really strong sense of camaraderie, that this stadium full of people felt like they came together, and that I could see that attending a game in that way made people feel part of something bigger than themselves. Which is why very often people have said that sports, in the United States especially, often plays the role of a religious experience. Because people are filled with awe, people are rooting for a team, people are really excited and really upset and just attending these collective events together. So for people who are not actually involved in religious congregations, for them, attending a sporting event is pretty close to that experience. It might sound strange to say that, but it really can be very true. The role of superstition is also something that highlights the similarities between sports and religious experiences. I don't know if you've watched the movie Silver Linings Playbook. In that movie, there are a number of different plot lines going on, but the key thing is that there is a focus on a game, and the people who watch the game, the key characters, especially Robert De Niro, the Robert De Niro character, who was the father of the hero, says that his presence while watching the game is a something that helps the team win, that he has to be there, otherwise the team will not win. And these are things that play a role. They're like tokens and fetishes and things like that that help people get a sense of power, or help people get a sense of greater meaning, and so on. So the role of superstition in Silver Linings Playbook, for example, highlights the role of sports as a collective experience, as a social experience. What other social experiences can you think of that you have on a day-to-day basis? When I was thinking about this, I realized that it was a little difficult for me to think about this right now during the pandemic, because our social experiences, by and large, have been so limited. We have been socially distanced. We have not actually socialized with many people at all. I think I've seen, friends maybe 3 or 4 times, and that too in socially distant situations. So to think about a social situation is a very strange thing. So for example, when I go to the grocery store, I feel like I'm in a social situation. Seeing people choosing similar things from the grocery aisles becomes a social experience. Where before the pandemic, they didn't seem so much like a social experience. It was much less intense in that sense. It was more like this is drudgery. Here I am at the grocery store again. Everybody's doing the same things. I'm competing with these people. I need to get ahead in line. Why is this line so slow? Now I'm very conscious of the social experience of the grocery store. So the pandemic also has changed, right? Has changed how we think of a social experience, possibly. For a long time, the pandemic, in many ways, is a life-changing experience and a historical experience, because within our lifetimes, and I'm pretty old, but within my lifetime, I've never had a similar experience like this. So something to think about is, what impact does living under the pandemic, in quarantine and lockdown, etc., have on the ways that we think about society, that we think about socializing, that we think about being together in society, and how is it different from how we lived before?